Hey cats, it's Ed, low energy bud here. Low energy because I literally just got through having COVID, which was nasty. Today I've got my initial views for you on a new Reebok shoe. It's the Floatride Energy X. Wow, it looks really, really big on screen. Thanks for tuning in, people. It's always appreciated. If you've yet to do so, hit that subscribe button, click the bell for notifications, and of course, give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with your running buddies. Merci beaucoup. A real look at this Energy X from Reebok. I think it grabs some positive parts of loads of different recent Reebok shoes and puts them together into a Jive Bunny style mega mix. It's a peppy, poppy masterpiece, a bit unlike the Jive Bunny tracks. I was thrown a pair of these Reebok shoes to test out from the people themselves. Probably because I've been trying their stuff out for ages and ages, you know, before it became hip and trendy to do so. So a few stats for you, because I know you like that kind of thing. I would engage another type of voice, but this is the only one I've got right now. The shoe in my UK size 11, which is a US 12, clocks in at just under 300 grams, 299. That's about 10.5 ounces, if that's your sort of thing. I have measured using very accurate apparatus that this one comes in at 40 millimeters in terms of the heel stack. Reebok reckon there's a 6 millimeter drop here, while I reckon in the forefoot I've got about 33 millimeters of stack. Either way, it's a girt biggin. Far more wallet saving 130 earth credits for this one, here in the UK at least. In my reviews we always start with the upper first. Before I do that though, I'm just going to have a little sip of drink. So as I mentioned earlier, this shoe in some ways reminds me of a whole host of other Reebok models, and sort of other brand models as well. The material used on the upper here is a little reminiscent of the Tempo Next Percent. Did give me some nice vibes from back then when I reviewed the shoe. The mesh fitting and true to size. Very minimal overlays here, most of it's just sort of added colouring and paint to put the logo in, and it does look really great actually. Look at that. There are some overlays in the back here, the heel section, and there's quite a considerable counter there. It does stretch quite a way round. The tongue here is taken straight from the Reebok Run Fast 3. Now, that upper was terrible. The tongue didn't have any gusseting and it just moved around everywhere and got caught up on both sides. That's not the case here. We do have some gusseting on both sides of the tongue. I found I had a fantastic lockdown in the shoe, and part of that was due to the padding in the heel section. Just really holds the foot in place. The padding is quite substantial here actually in the back. On first glance it actually looks a little bit like the padding that we see in the Next Percent from Nike, but it's actually a lot more sort of distributed over the whole of the heel, rather than just those sort of strips that you get in the Vaporfly. I do like the materials that they've used here in the Energy X, and the proportions as well. They've got it just right. You don't have all this extra material hanging around. There's nothing worse than lacing up some shoes these days and just finding that the laces are almost meeting in the middle. You've got so much material there that you've got to try and use up. No problem dialing in a good fit here without loads of bunching of the materials on the lateral and medial side. Only major gripe really for me was that over about 7 miles I found that I did get some tongue slippage, mainly across to the side like this, and there's no lace loop there to try and hold the tongue in place. The flat and quite coarse laces are a real treat. They stayed tied and stayed put without any major issues. Just a very comfortable upper here that just does what it needs to do and stays out the way. One slightly puzzling fact is that this shoe doesn't seem to come in half sizes at the moment. I would assume that Reebok will remedy that at some point. As a marathon aimed shoe, I think you do perhaps want that option to be able to half size. I would assume that will be coming in this shoe. I'm going to knock off 0.1 for that slightly strange tongue slippage I experienced, which gives us a 2.9 out of 3 after my initial runs for the upper.
Midsole now.
There's a hefty wedge of that Floatride foam here in the Energy X. Maximised up to about 40 millimeters in the heel in my size. A lot of people assume that it's float ride foam all the way through. I have it on very good authority that we do in fact have some float ride plus underneath the plate that we have in the forefoot of the shoe. You can feel it as well if you run at any sort of pace. It's there, certainly a little bit more springy, a little bit more perhaps focused, I suppose, than the float ride standard foam. This gives the shoe a slightly more rigid but still forgiving feel than when compared to something like the Energy 4, for example. It absolutely fits into that rocker style category of kind of meeting the floor and then feeling the transition being really smooth, I suppose. Yeah, so you've got that rigidity there from the mid to forefoot. Straight off the bat, I can see this shoe being a real winner for the cash-conscious competitors that might be running a half marathon or marathon later this year. There are loads of people out there that don't want to or can't shell out a huge amount of money for a Vaporfly or a Adios Pro 2. Times are hard, man, and this is a shoe that's going to help out loads of people that are more on a budget. This could be a race option for either of those longer distance events and a superb training tool also. Loads of cushion here for those long runs and the steady sessions. At half marathon target pace felt absolutely great for me. Rewards you with a little push when you hit that Float Ride Plus section in the forefoot. Just a nice springy feel. Nice and solid, stable, certainly more so than some of the other very narrow or arch-hugging models that I've tested out of recent time. Something like the Takumi Sen 8, for example, there's certain runners that just aren't going to be able to get their foot into the shoe. Some people can't run in the Vaporfly models, they get shin splints. There was a viewer recently commented about the Saucony models, they just really hurt his upper legs. There's a much wider footbed here, and I just think it's going to be a little bit more forgiving and just a more comfortable, more budget race option. Kind of the mix of the foams here and the plate make this a more consistent, I suppose, version of the Brooks Hyperion Elite 2. Certainly a little bit more cushioned and a bit softer. And, you know, it's not 220 quid. Makes it much more palatable. Gotta be honest, I'm getting a little bored of people just saying, oh, Reebok, they're not proper running shoes. You can run a half marathon or a marathon or whatever in whatever shoe you want. You can wear a pair of Crocs if you wanted to. People just blinded by brands and icons and things like that. They fixate on certain ones. I just look at it as a shoe. Does it work well for running? Well, yes it does. I found the Float Ride foam great up to about 10 miles in the Energy series, but the added Float Ride Plus and that half carbon plate from the mid to forefoot here elevate the ENERGYX into the upper echelons. Just really hit the spot for long runs. I think this one you've just got a little bit of extra structure and rigidity there. Again, I suppose I draw a comparison to the Tempo Next Percent. A less aggressive feel, similar weights, but this one has more of a rocker style feel where the Tempo Next Percent was just like a kit car, I suppose. Very aggressive on toe off, that one. This is a little bit smoother. No, this isn't going to be a Vaporfly Destroyer, an Adios Pro Eliminator, more a cost-effective cushion shoe for running a half or full marathon where you want something assistive but with a more forgiving feel. That Float Ride midsole here will also be of use for those longer training runs of 20 miles. As such, no speed king of sorts here. It's not going to outdo any of those top models, but then again it's like half the price of the Alphafly. I think it'll bring loads of enjoyment to those mid-packers and the runners out there for the enjoyment. I liked everything I experienced here in the midsole, so I'll give it a 2.7 out of 3 after my initial runs. Probably not something I'd select for a 5 or 10k, but anything where you've got to go the distance, it'll be there. Outsole now. I think my voice might just about make it through to the end of the review. A thin servant spreading of rubber here. Reebok have really reduced it to bring that weight down. Certainly feels like a different compound to what we found on the Energy 3 and 4. A bit of a protrusion fest here with those tiny little pimples everywhere. I haven't found that they wear down all that quickly. I know a few other reviewers have mentioned that. The main rubber in the forefoot here is quite tactile, quite coarse actually, to the touch. Works absolutely fine on road and pavement, and that's probably the type of terrain that most people will use the shoe on if they're running a half or full marathon. There's a considerable cutout section there of the exposed midsole foam in the outsole, but as you can see, the rubber is actually one large section that's stuck on as the outsole. In terms of the actual rubber, it's a little bit more like the consistency of the Adios Pro 1 or 2, nothing really like the Vaporfly or New Balance models whatsoever. So there's almost no sections of the outsole where the exposed midsole foam makes contact with the ground, so I think that's going to improve the durability of the shoe somewhat. And despite the fact that the rubber depth here is actually quite minimal, I don't think it's a massive problem considering it's aimed at being a race shoe. No rain-soaked roads to test these out on as of yet, but once COVID's firmly behind me and the heavens open, I'll be out there. But so far, I think I'd give this probably a 2.7 out of 3 for the outsole after initial runs. Got to talk value now. So 130 Earth credits here in the UK. These come in firmly under pretty much all other contenders. I think it's a touch lighter than the Zoom Fly 4 in my size. Far more forgiving than the similarly priced Hoka Rocket X, although a bit heavier. It's a more conventional drop here, certainly in the Reebok shoe, and multiple use case functionality. You could probably use this shoe for just about anything really. Training and your more long distance racing. I think it will just work better across paces than both of those two other shoes that I've mentioned as well. I can certainly see what Reebok are aiming for here, what they're attempting. I think it's a very welcome addition to the part plated shoe lineup that we've got. There's so many options nowadays, but I think they've opted more for comfort at a more cost effective price. It really is a very nice shoe to run in. You just get your foot into it, it just feels like you could run for miles and miles. There's no sort of big gimmick about it. It just feels good. Most people, as I've stated before, are probably quite happy to just have a very comfortable shoe on foot when they do a marathon. And let's not forget the buy-in public are probably the ones that make up most of the sales, right? For the masses, a great shoe here. For the masses, a great distance shoe here at a much more wallet-friendly lower price. I love it from a training perspective so far. There's very little to dislike, in fact. Dialed in the upper here, the midsole cushion is spot on, and they've got the amount of rubber just right on the outsole. Can't wait to get back out there in these as soon as I can. It's hard not to give it a 3 out of 3 for value. It's just such a great price for what you get. So if I've totaled the scores up correctly, which I think I have this time, that gives us an 11.3 out of 12 after my initial runs for the Reebok FloatRide Energy X. Certainly worth the wait to try this one out, and I'm excited to get back out on them again very soon. Just feels like Reebok have put all the best ideas that they've had from recent shoes over the last couple of years into one shoe. Lots and lots to like here at a very, very wallet-friendly price. Are you going to be picking up the Reebok FloatRide Energy X anytime soon? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. A musical interlude for you, where I've been resting an awful lot because I felt pretty rough with the virus. I've been digging further back into my 80s hip-hop collection. It really did strike me how much I liked the Ultra Magnetic MCs when they were around. Ego Tripping, for example, was a fantastic track. One of those tunes where they've kind of mocked up the start like it's at a concert. They're sort of hyping up the crowd ready and then the track kicks off. Now, I really like some of those 80s tunes where it sounds like they've actually constructed the backing track using the turntables rather than just some sequence thing. Just sounds so much more organic, like, I don't know, a track from the 50s or 60s that was done with drums and guitar, whereas later it was sort of all pre-processed and too precise, I suppose. Back in the 80s, hip-hop sounded really raw and DIY. There's some really great cutting as well, interspersed between the vocal lines, that really breaks the track up and gives it some unique feel. Really love how they've managed to get the Ultra Magnetic MCs sort of section in there with different sounds and samples. Really quite imaginative. It really gives the track some character. Dig back into the 80s hip-hop, guys. There's so many real gems there. Okay, thanks for tuning in, always appreciated. Let me know your thoughts and comments on the Reebok Energy X down here. Hit that subscribe button, click the bell for notifications, give this video a thumbs up, like, and also share it with your running buddies. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you